The modern player today would just run rings around even the best teams of 20 years ago, and I suspect the same will be in 10 years' time as well. For example, young Sam De Koning, our fullback, is 19 years of age. He's 204 centimetres. It's just unheard of that would happen in 2001. Now, that's an answer to a hypothetical question from Chris Scott in today's Herald Sun as to who was the better team, Brisbane from 01 to 04 or Richmond from 17 to 20. Scott is definitive. I'm not so sure. The 2020 version of Liam Baker, 30-year-old Trent Cotchin, Camden McIntosh, Marlon Pickett, Kane Lambert, Jason Castagna, Ivan Soldo, Jack Graham, Jake Arts. I don't know if they'd even get a game in that Brisbane Lions team. And Brisbane's stars were better too. Brown, Black, Ackermanis, Lappin, Voss, Leppich, the list goes on. In a thought-provoking column, journalist Sam Landsberger has analysed different sets of data, game trends, and how the body shape of today's AFL players has changed in the last 20 years. For example, the average height of AFL players has increased from 185.8 centimetres in 1999 to 188.2 today. There were just 25 players over 200 centimetres back then. Today there's 76. The Brisbane dynasty in the early 2000s had Jonathan Brown and Alistair Lynch measuring in at 195 and 194 centimetres respectively. And up the other end, Justin Leppich and Mal Michael were patrolling defence, but they were just 190 and 191. The 2022 version of the Lions has Eric Hipwood and Joe Danaher at one end and Harris Andrews up the other end. All are 200 plus. The midfielders are giants now too. Simon Black's playing weight was 81 kilograms. And Nigel Lappin and Jason Ackermanis are around 84-85. Patrick Cripps today weighs 93. Christian Petrarca and Ollie Wines would be closer to 100 than 80. There is truth to what Scott is saying. The footy is much faster than it was 20 years ago. The coaching advancements have also been significant. Yesterday's players didn't have to deal with the relentless press on the ball carrier, which takes away time and space and forces quicker decisions and more errors. There was little zoning back then either. Forwards actually played on backs, mostly one-on-one. Now defenders guard space, not opponents. And when they are caught in a rare one-on-one contest, they have the confidence that a teammate will come over the top for aerial support. The best midfielders back then had to fight for their possessions as well, usually because they had someone from the opposition assigned to at least limit their influence. Accumulating 30 disposals was an achievement. Today, it's just the standard. In 2001, Simon Black led the league in disposals with 622. 17 years later, in 2018, Hawthorn's Tom Mitchell amassed 848. That's more than 200 more. These extraordinary midfield numbers haven't improved the game. Give me Black's 24 and 8 clearances over Mitchell's 39, including 22 handballs, every day of the week. Until this year, at least you could rely on the ruckman to go head-to-head. Still, after what Mark Blichtavs did in the final series, where he starts as a midfielder, which allows his ruckman to drop behind the ball and play as an extra defender while he assumes the stoppage work, I think even those big man matchups will become a thing of the past. So while Landsberger is correct with his analysis of how the speed, tactics and athletes have evolved over the past 20 years, I'm not sure it's created a better product, and I'm not sure yesterday's teams wouldn't compete with today's. Gerard, I love the footy today, and I admire the finely tuned and powerful players it produces, but I also loved it yesterday. And I, for one, really miss those one-on-one matchups that have nearly become extinct. Is footy better today, and do I need to suck it up and accept it? 1300 736 736.
Is it better today than which particular era? Because if you sort of compared it to the congestion era, I'd say absolutely. I love the footy this year, I've got to say. It opened up. Players were going forward. The Tigers are, as you said, responsible for that. But it's ebbed and flowed probably since the mid-2000s. I mean, Roosie was really strong on, slowing the ball down, going sideways, and it took off. Controlling the ball was really strong, and we had a grand final where you won with 8 goals, which was great if you were barracking for the winning side. But for neutrals, it killed the game to some degree, even though it was a really tight finish. But I've loved the way it opened up. Speed of ball movement or speed of the game is a really interesting concept, because if you judge it by the athlete and how quickly they move, well, there's no question that they move quicker today.
Yes.
And they run faster, and they run more often faster.
And they're bigger, and they jump higher, and they're more powerful. All of that, yep.
But to me, the measure of speed of the game is how fast the Sherrin moves. And for a long, long time, it was moving a lot quicker in the 80s and the 90s than it was in the 2000s, where congestion and slowly building the ball up. I mean, compare Collingwood over the last few years to Collingwood of this year. Slow ball movement, laborious ball movement, as against really quick ball movement. Now, Bucks nearly won a flag, 2018, was it?
Yep.
Going quickly, and he ended up slowing it down and more control just to tidy up the defence, and that was fair enough. But to me, the ball slowed down dramatically, and I think the game is much better when the Sherrin is free and it moves around. But I don't think it moves around much quicker. I mean, the ball off the boot is no quicker now than it was in the 80s and the 90s.
Okay, well, you can have your say, 1300 736 736. The last paragraph from this is from an analyst called Rob Harding. He says it's hard to get your head around this, but the reality is North Melbourne of 2022 would beat Brisbane of 2002. Nick Larkey is jumping all over Mal Michael. Now, I couldn't disagree with that more. I don't think North Melbourne this year are beating Brisbane even 20 years ago. But Dave is on the line. He wants to have his say. Fire away, Dave, and thanks for joining us.
No worries. Merry Christmas to you two and your families, boys. I hope you have a good one.
You too, mate.
Listen, the reason the game is the way that it is today is because too many free kicks are being waved through. The disposal of the football is atrocious. Players are just throwing it. Until we start paying every free kick in its merit, then we'll get our one-on-one competition up on the forward line and a clean game of football. Since Sydney have come into competition, we've allowed for this rugby league rubbish style of football to continue, and it's killing the game.
Good on you, Dave. Thanks for your strong thoughts. Lindsay is with us. You're a Brisbane supporter. Lindsay, what do you think?
God, spare me. I am a Brisbane supporter, but you're going to tell me that Voss, Ackermanis, mention Nigel Lappin on a half-back flank in today's go, Jonathan Brown. I mean, it's just laughable. Brisbane would murder Richmond if they played them. Absolutely murder them.
I'm agreeing with you. But Chris Scott played in that team, and he's saying no way. He says that he said today's players would run rings around them.
But
I think
what Chris is saying, and I mean we'll get him on at some stage and clarify this, but I assume what he's saying is the athlete of today is up against the athlete of yesteryear. Not the talent base. I mean, if you trained up Brisbane of back in those days with Ackermanis and Voss, etc., at the same level as they train today, that's a different question to the one I think that Chris is proposing.
It is. He says, because he was on the front bar, so I've got to credit them. It was Mick Malloy has been going on about this for a while. Chris said, I do have a serious take on this. It's more a reference to how far the game has come. It's not self-deprecating in any way, but the modern player today will just run rings around us. But your question is, if they're both in their prime and they're both
trained
up against each other, they train the same, they're using the same tactics that everyone is using, then who would win? 1300 736 736. Thanks, Lindsay. Let's go to Macca in Horsham. G'day, Macca.
How you going, fellas?
Good.
I hate the way the game's being played now. I go back to the 80s and 90s. It was one-on-one. Key forwards kicked 100 goals. Now it's like watching rugby.
Well, it's certainly a combination of rugby and soccer. I mean, I thought you could see a lot of AFL tactics in that we've pinched from the Soccer World Cup, which was pretty evident to me on the wide shots and the way the lines move in defence. But I've got to say, Brett, I reckon it's a damn sight better now than it was 3 or 4 years ago when it was chipping the ball around and it was killing full forwards. And what we've lost is that, and we got it back a bit this year, but that speed of ball movement off the back line, which to me is part of the DNA of AFL football. When it was at its quickest and finest, and I think 70% of goals came from balls emanating out of the back line, that's when full forwards were kicking 100 goals. A couple of years ago, I haven't got the exact numbers, but it was probably 30% of balls were going from the back 50 to the forward 50, and full forwards just died a slow death. So the 100 goals is impossible until we free that ball up out of defence.
Good on you, Macca. Thanks for your call. Let's go to Brett. Hi, Brett.
Yeah, g'day, Cornsey. Laughable. Who said that North of 2022 would beat Brisbane? What have North won? 3 games in 4 years? Imagine Nick Larkey. He falls over on an 85 kilogram player. Imagine him playing on Mal Michael back then. Imagine Acker playing on Luke McDonald down forward, or Bailey Scott, or someone, or Chris Johnson playing on Jack Marty in the forward pocket. Come on, turn it up.
Nah,
sometimes when you're trying to make a point, you can overreach.
I think they overreached there. This text, the 2022 Roos couldn't beat the 1978 Woodville Peckers, and that text is in all caps on the Temper text. Good on you, Brett. Got to say, I agree with you. Ben, what do you think of today's game?
Who was the best player in the Peckers that year?
Well, if you can text us through that, that'd be good. G'day, Ben.
Yeah, g'day, fellas. I'm on the head of listening to the show. Love it. But I love watching the footy classics on Foxtel. It's just so much better football. I can't watch those games.
What annoys you about today's game?
Well, for one, the low scoring. I don't like that at all. There's no big hits. That's one thing I miss. That's one thing I love watching, sorry.
Yeah,
I would say there's no big hits. I mean,
going to be a balance, though, isn't it?
Without disagreeing with you, I think there's still plenty of serious body. I mean, that's the biggest thing about the game now. The blokes are so much bigger, so the big hits are actually from bigger blokes.
David's on the line, and he disagrees with me. Fire away, Dave.
Yeah, g'day, Kane. G'day, Gerard. Look, I disagree. I think, we've got to look at the times and where we're sitting in a place. Look, I went along as a kid with my family. If you remember, we went there going to watch one star. I'm a St Kilda supporter. All I went to go watch was Tony Lockett. You'd have your days and you'd have a few other stars there going. Now, I'm so great, I can actually take my son, and there's 6 stars in a side. If you have a look at it, this year also, we had 12 teams competing for the top 8. I mean, that wasn't happening 20 years ago. I think the game's in a better position now, and I mean, we've just got to. Our generation from there needs to grow, and needs to grow with the young ones that are in the game now.
Yeah, once again, I appreciate the opinion. I think there was still more than one star in a team back then, though, and even the era we're talking about, Brisbane had 6 of them.
Depends on what team you're looking at.
Yeah,
when you look at Hawthorn back in those days, they had state of origin players on every line: Brereton, Dunstall, Platten. Langford in the back line, Mew in the back line, Dipper on one wing. My mind is failing me as we speak, but there were so many super players. I mean, John Kennedy Jr. was a hell of a player across the half-back line. They went on and on and on. But nevertheless, 2 different things in some respects. I mean, there's the style of play, and then there's how well prepared they are. But when the pandemic was on and there was no footy on at all, there was a replay of all the state of origin games out of the 80s and early 90s, and there was replays of big games through that 80s and 90s period, and they got huge ratings.
Yep. I was just laughing because did get a text on who was the best player from the Woodville Peckers, Gerard, and it was Ralphie Sewer, Zip Zap Sewer. It was an absolute star. So thanks for sending that through. And this is a good text, and you and I have discussed this off air, but it says, would today's players run rings around those of yesteryear if they had to play 100% game time? And it does allude to that in this article, because they had a look at Dane Swan, who he didn't retire that long ago, did he, Dane Swan? But says, a part of his stretch there, he played 100% game time.
Yep.
And the year would have been, in the early just before, so 2009-ish era, Dane Swan was playing as a midfielder, 100% game time. Now, interchange rotations went absolutely through the roof, and that's documented on the back of what Mick Malthouse did at Collingwood. They got above 130 in 2013. In 2003, they were 26. So limiting interchange is another topic, perhaps, for another day.